Hi, hello, and welcome to this week's True Crime live stream. If you're new here, I'm FEARSONA. You can call me FEARSONA Red, and I'm your friendly neighborhood True Crime VTuber. Here to give you full body chills. Here to give myself full body chills because today's case is a heavy one. Although this story has evidently been trending due to the recent release of the TV series by Netflix, and I just finished it like literally yesterday. The case itself is definitely one of the most infamous ones, one which left its horrifying mark in people's memory. So, just a fair warning, there's gonna be graphic descriptions of violence and very disturbing information, very disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised. So, I just wanted to say before we start, it is a heavy case. So please be respectful. I'm gonna try to, focus on the victims as much as possible, but obviously, I can't avoid talking about the drastic parts, and I can't avoid because it's an integral part of this case, and we have to understand like the heaviness, the seriousness of the crime, and how much the law enforcement pretty much fucked up. The case of a serial killer who got away with dozens of murders of young men for nearly 2 decades before finally getting caught. This is the case of Jeffrey Dahmer. But let's start from the end, because it is Dahmer's last potential victim who became his downfall and helped uncover the true colors of a monster. Okay, let me just say, before I get into the story, I should have said it at the beginning. I just wanted to send big thanks to Kanta, one of my mods, because they helped me compile the information. So he did a lot of research, and I just like edited the notes under like for this video, and then I made the obviously the slides, and I'm gonna go through the case. But Kanta, big thanks. Thank you so much for helping me compile like all the information. I didn't have to like scramble and take a shit ton of time, because I have as I mentioned, like I have a lot of stuff offline. So again, thank you so much, Kanta, for helping me out with this case. Okay, now we can get into the case. So let's start from the end. On July 22nd, 1991, a group of friends at a gay bar were approached by a young white man who they thought was a little awkward and perhaps a little strange, but fairly attractive. The man introduced himself as Jeff and told them that he was a photographer looking for some company and potential new models for his work. He offered the man $100 if one of them would follow him into his apartment and allowed him to take some nude photographs. While the friends were reluctant, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards agreed and left the bar with Dahmer. Tracy later testified that upon entering Dahmer's apartment, he noticed a foul odor and commented on it, but Jeffrey simply told him that his fridge broke down and a bunch of meat stored inside went bad, and that's where the smell was coming from. So Tracy felt uneasy when Jeff locked the front door, and when Edwards then wanted to leave, Dahmer suddenly threatened him with a knife and proceeded to handcuff Tracy. Next, he revealed his plans to kill the young man if he did not comply. Edwards, stalling for time and trying to assure Dahmer that he would comply with everything and he would not leave, that calmed Jeff down basically, and that gave Tracy a chance to escape. So he ran out of the apartment and flagged down 2 officers. He begged them, and I mean begged them, to remove the handcuffs and told them that some freak in the building had tried to attack him. The officers couldn't remove the handcuffs without the original key, so they made their way to Dahmer's apartment to find a resolution to the handcuffs and situation. They obviously wanted to investigate, and so they led Tracy back to the building. This is where Dahmer basically messed up. He allowed the cops in, allowed the police officers in, and he was hoping that he could just use his usual tactic of charm and assuring the officers that it was just sex play gone too far, and they were homosexual men. They were just about to engage in some foreplay, in some sex play, and then he was hoping that he would make officers uncomfortable enough that they would leave, because it happened before, and I'm gonna get to that. But the officers were insistent on looking for the handcuffs key, which Dahmer actually had lost long ago. He only ever got the handcuffs off of his victims because they were much easier to remove once the hand was cut off. So he didn't need the key. So the officers are looking for the key when one of them finds a drawer with Jeffrey's photo collection of dismembered and nude bodies. And, the officers were clearly in shock. At the beginning, they thought, okay, maybe it's not real. Maybe, Jeff actually tried to explain it, oh, this is just art. These are just photos. They are not real. But, noticing that the apartment matched the scenery in the photos and noticing more and more disturbing stuff inside of the apartment, the officers knew these photos were very much real, and this was the location. So they arrested Dahmer that day. What followed was a thorough search of the apartment by the investigating and forensic teams. And what they discovered was beyond what they expected. Investigators discovered collected blood drippings upon a tray at the bottom of Dahmer's refrigerator, a freshly cut head of a black male, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle. Each were wrapped inside plastic bags upon the shelves. And in the freezer, investigators discovered an entire torso, plus a bag of human organs and flesh stuck to the ice at the bottom. And then when they searched the apartment more thoroughly, they found the following: 2 complete skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 preserved penises, a mummified scalp, a 57-gallon drum with 3 other torsos dissolving in acid, 74 Polaroids of his victims in varied stage of dismemberment. So some of them obviously were photographs where the victims were still alive. Some of them were just, already dead, but the body was complete. Some of them obviously, just various stages of dismemberment. Okay, so it was then discovered that Dahmer had at some point started to cook and eat portions of his victims. This was apparent by the cookware, prepared slices of human flesh he intended to cook, as well as obviously the pieces of human flesh, human body in the fridge. Witness statements about the smells from the house were also coming to play because the neighbors were complaining about the foul smell, and just foul smell as if someone was cooking something, but it just wasn't right. It wasn't just normal food. It was believed that at the time of his arrest, he had only eaten human meat for the past 2 months. And that literally can't be good for you. Okay, let me just remind you, there's a pinned message in my live chat, as well as link down below in the description of this video. But Rose, my VTuber friend, my VTuber hubby, he's running a crowdfund campaign for this amazing service, 4 Paws Dog Service, and that's Service Dogs Training Center. So please, please support the crowdfund action. I don't know how to event. Okay. Anyway, so you can find the link to the website of the dog service training service, 4 Paws Dog Service Dogs. I'm sorry, I just keep messing it up. But you can find the link to their website, the official website, and also to Rose's coffee crowdfund. I can't say it without like breaking the word apart. But yeah, please check it out. Okay. So the streak of bloody murders he had committed had finally come to light. And now I'm gonna go back to the roots, go back to the beginning, and talk about Jeffrey and his family, as well as all of his victims and like the timeline, how it happened, where it happened, what went wrong. Okay, so Jeffrey Dahmer came from a middle class and relatively normal family, though his childhood wasn't happy. His parents would constantly argue over his mother, Joyce, being a depressed hypochondriac and constantly creating drama for attention and sympathy. And his father, Lionel, basically dissociating himself from his failed marriage and rarely being home, especially after Jeffrey's younger brother David was born. Jeff's parents would divorce when Dahmer was 18, and his mother would just leave the house immediately, taking Jeffrey's younger brother David away with her. From early on, Jeff was intrigued by bones. His father was actually worried that he wasn't showing interest in anything. He wasn't particularly good at school. And when finally, Jeffrey showed some interest in sweeping animal bones from underneath a crawl space, that was the time. It was this one event, which his father described in the book he wrote later in 1994. So it was the time when he was sweeping animal bones from underneath a crawl space at their house, and Jeff actually showed interest. He wanted to keep them to play with, and he said he just liked the noise of those bones. For the first time, for the first few years, Jeffrey was very energetic, and it seemed like he was like an excited child. He was energetic, and that is until he had a hernia surgery at 4, in which his personality reversed into a very secluded and quiet kid with only a few friends. His fascination with bones remained, so that didn't change. It was just the same. In his childhood and later on in his life in adolescence, he would collect roadkill and other dead animals to dissect and claim the bones. His father was actually describing it as, much later, the father would say I was just at last I was happy that he was interested in something, because for the longest time he was just not interested in anything. It was a morbid fascination that would later become his sole obsession in life. And later, around his high school years, Jeff developed interest in human anatomy over animals. This was also found around the time when he discovered his own sexuality and interest in men. He was also known to start drinking heavily around 14. Jeffrey's friends and classmates would be able to smell the alcohol on him. He actually referred to it as medicine. I'm not sure why. I think from what I can gather, it was just to like maybe numb himself to everything. Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know. Like some sources just say that. I don't know how reliable that is. So as he fantasized more about men, his love of the dead began to mix with his love for men. He wanted, like from the sources, like he actually wanted the perfect lover, it seemed, allegedly. He wanted the perfect lover that he could dominate and control. He developed a fetish for hairless torsos, thighs, biceps, and other parts. His fantasies became more and more about having a body to do with what he wanted, by any means necessary. So this fantasy almost bore fruit at the age of 16, when he actually planned to assault a local jogger that he found attractive, and he was planning, like one day, he was planning to actually, like he hid in the bushes along the normal route where the jogger was, like, you know, he would see the jogger running, and he hid in the bushes with a baseball bat, and he was planning to attack the man. But by sheer luck, the jogger never showed up that day. So, you know, that failed, obviously. It didn't happen. But it would be 2 years later that Jeffrey actually took the first life. So Jeffrey had been having some fantasies about assaulting and using a random shirtless hitchhiker. At 18, he finally found his chance with another 18-year-old boy named Stephen Hicks. And this is actually infuriating. I was watching, like, I was kind of like when I was watching the TV series like on Netflix, I also then looked up if this was actually true. And yeah, like the sources say that the police officers who later investigated, like, you know, they interviewed the first interview with Jeffrey Dahmer after he was caught, and they were trying to go over the whole timeline, like all the victims. You know, they actually asked him about this hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks, and they asked him like, oh, you know, like, is this where you killed Stephen Hicks, or is this when you killed Stephen Hicks? And Jeffrey wouldn't remember his name. He was just like, oh, that was his name. And that was fucking infuriating, because it's like, you don't even know their names. Like, you don't even fucking remember the names. Like, not even the last name. Like, you don't even like have the decency. I don't know, can it be called a decency? Like, you didn't even have the decency to remember the first name of who you killed. Anyway, so Hicks was on his way to a rock concert in Ohio, shirtless, on the side of the road, and Jeffrey actually was passing by in his car and offered a ride. Dahmer then enticed the young man to stop by his house, Jeffrey's house, for some beers along the way, and then he would drop him off at the concert, which also, by the way, drunk driving. Like, what the fuck? He's like literally, like, I mean, okay, it was what, 1970s? I think it was 1978. I don't remember. I have to. Oh yeah, it's 1978. What am I talking about? I have it on screen. But yeah, drunk driving, from what I could gather, that was like a regular thing for Jeffrey, to just like be pissed drunk and drive, or drive while he was drinking beer, which is great. Okay, so he took Stephen back to the house, and after a few drinks, um, Hicks was making it known that, through casual conversation, that he was like into women and not into men. He started to suggest leaving. He was kind of being alarmed. He was like, okay, man, like, why are we still sitting here? Let's go. We had that beer. Let's go. Can you drop me off at the concert like you promised? And Jeff, feeling desperate and panicking, then hits Stephen in the back of the head twice with a 10-pound dumbbell. He then uses the bar to strangle Stephen and make sure that he's dead. Strangulation later becomes Dahmer's main method of killing, which later transitions into something much, much worse. I'm gonna get to that. I'm not gonna talk about it now. Okay, so once dead, Jeffrey stripped the torso and caressed it to his pleasure. So he was, I think, like, even before the murder, he was like trying to, obviously he was hitting on Stephen. He was trying to apparently like kiss him, but Stephen was just like, dude, I'm into women, I'm not into men, let's go. But then, when Stephen was dead, before getting rid of the body, Jeffrey was like masturbating over the corpse, and pleasuring himself, which is fucked up. To dispose of the body, he actually cut Stephen's body up into small pieces, placed them in 5 different bags, and later dissolved the flesh and crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and basically dispersed the crushed bones in his backyard. And it would be another 9 years before he kills again, and frequently. It should be stated that from this point on, Dahmer will target almost entirely men of color. And that's explained by, he liked hairless torsos, and men of color were, I guess, more likely to have hairless torsos, or that, he knew the cops would be less likely to care about like crimes on men of color at the time. But that's up for debate. That's not, 100% confirmed. But it was possibly both. Okay, so at the insistence of his father, Lionel, Jeff would go to college. He would attend the Ohio State University, but this lasted only 6 months, after which Dahmer was expelled for being intoxicated all the time in class and skipping class, so he was kicked out. And then, at his father's insistence, he enrolled in the army. He was a field medic because he couldn't bring himself to draw blood, which is fucking ironic. I mean, that's at least what the sources say. But it's fucking ironic that he couldn't bring himself to draw. I cannot. And then, again, he was found to be too drunk and was honorably discharged, having been a very, mediocre serviceman. Also, apparently, this is where he found out about drugs that he would later use to drug his victims and to numb his victims before the murders. So after the army, he spent some time in Florida, but moved back to Ohio to live with his father and then stepmother. When that didn't work out because of his drinking, and because of getting constantly like fired from his jobs, he moved in with his grandmother, who lived in West Allis in Wisconsin. There, he basically, at the insistence of his grandmother, he dabbled in religion to maybe push out his killer urges. But they didn't work, obviously. He tried his hands at a few jobs, and in between those, he had more drunken outbursts, like indecent exposure in public. In 1986, he was actually convicted of lewd behavior in front of two minors, 12-year-old boys. These are not the boys, like, by the way. This is the Sintasamphone family, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. But basically, this exposed him. Well, I mean, okay. So some sources say that he exposed himself in front of two minors, 12-year-old boys, and those were the Sintasamphone brothers. Others say it was a pair of completely different boys, and the Sintasamphone family came into play much like later. We're not entirely sure. Like, I was discussing it with Kanta, and yeah, like the sources honestly vary. Like, they say, like, at this point it's kind of getting wonky, but I'm gonna try to like talk about all of it, like possibly as it happened. It's just be, you know, like, just be mindful. This is kind of messy. This part is kind of messy and like unclear. Okay, so he was convicted of that lewd behavior in front of two minors when he exposed himself to them and masturbated in front of them close to the Kinnikinnick river. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. Okay, so that same year, the Sintasamphone family moved into the area where Dahmer's grandmother and Dahmer himself lived at the time. And on the same day, mere hours after moving into the new home, the older son named, and here also the reports vary, so either his name was Samsak or Kazan. And again, I'm not sure which one is it, because articles just name him differently every time. But basically, I'm just gonna call him Samsak. So Samsak encounters Dahmer, and Jeff then convinced him to go to his house, where he drugged and assaulted the young boy. And here it's not like absolutely clear if he also like exposed himself to him or if he molested the boy, but like oftentimes like it says like, oh, he molested the boy. Fortunately, Samsak managed to escape from Dahmer's apartment, and he would run back to his home and alert the authorities. Dahmer was sentenced to spend 10 months in jail and got released on probation, and that was, I believe, I'm not sure, like that was, it's also very unclear if this was for the that lewd behavior in front of the 12-year-olds. I think it was, but then there was like another sentence for the molesting of the Sintasamphone boy. Who the fuck knows? So why is this incident significant? Like this, the one with with Samsak, with the Sintasamphone family, because 3 years later, Samsak's younger brother, Konorak, by pure fucking coincidence, from what I can gather, by pure fucking coincidence, would become Dahmer's future victim. And I will get to that in a minute, because this particular murder was just also uncovered a very shocking problem with bias and racism within the police force when it comes to a high profile, very heavy case like that. And it was just so abundantly clear where priorities lie, where like the treatment, the difference in treatment between like, someone like a white person who's reporting a crime, or a white person who's answering to a crime, and a person of color who is reporting to a crime, or people from poor areas who report a crime. It was just like so abundantly clear. I'm gonna talk about it. But this basically contributed to Dahmer getting away with many crimes. Okay, so we're still in that period of 9 years when Dahmer did not murder anyone. But what changed? What caused him to get back to the killing spree? Short answer, public library. So it was actually a visit to a public library that became a catalyst for his future crimes. A random stranger tossed a crumbled note in front of Dahmer, soliciting oral sex in the bathroom. And Jeff didn't take up on that offer, but the thought of it made his sexual urges grow. From then, he became familiar and a fixture in the gay dating scene in Milwaukee's gay bars and gay bathhouses. It was at the bathhouses, like he was introduced, I think one day he came to a bathhouse, like he was actually taken to a bathhouse with a guy he met at a gay bar. And, you know, like he was introduced to that, you know, he had no idea that the bathhouses were a thing. And then, you know, he was brought to the bathhouse and clearly for homosexual men. And, you know, like he discovered, okay, this can be a place I can practice in. So basically it was at these bathhouses that he practiced his next set of skills, putting his partners to sleep with drugs so he can have dominance over them. After too many of these incidents at one bathhouse, at like a couple of bathhouses, Dahmer's membership at the bathhouse was revoked and he relocated his methods to hotels. Yeah, that was pretty, like, I watched this episode where it was like, you know, this incident was depicted and it was so fucked up. And he just kept bringing people and drugging them in the bathhouses. Some of them had like OD'd, but were saved. I'm not sure, like I'm not 100% sure if any of them died, but it doesn't seem so. But definitely a couple of them OD'd, and you know, like ambulances had to be called, and obviously like his membership was revoked. Okay, so he relocated to hotels. Let me just, okay. Wait. And one hotel incident broke the floodgates of his dark desires. And then we get to his next victim, Steve Tuomi. So on November 20th, 1987, Jeff eyed a 25-year-old Steve Tuomi at a gay bar they both frequented. Dahmer offered to spend the night together at a hotel. He claims to have had no intention to kill Steven, but then woke up from, you know, a whole night of drinking and like basically a blackout drunk night the next morning to find Steven brutally beaten, bruised and bloodied, and his hands to be sore and bruised himself. So clearly, you know, Jeffrey was the one that had beaten Tuomi to death. He panicked and he actually left the hotel with the body in the room. He went to the nearby mall, which was a future hunting spot for him. He bought a large suitcase to transport the body out of the hotel. And he got a taxi home with that suitcase. And apparently when the driver, who was like putting the suitcase in the trunk, told him like jokingly, what's in here, a dead body? And Dahmer apparently like just giggled and replied, yeah. And they just both laughed at the joke, at the supposed joke, but obviously it was not a joke, it was actually a body. So once Dahmer got the body home, he once again dismembered the flesh, pounded the bones and disposed of them. However, this will be the first time he kept a trophy, because he saved the head of Steven Tuomi. He dissolved the flesh with a detergent and then bleached the skull. Both processes he learned from his father, while kind of handling the roadkill. However, he had messed up and the skull became too brittle to use. So he was planning to use the skull for sexual gratification. Obviously, that didn't work out. The skull was like just too brittle, and yeah, so it didn't work out. Okay, so over the course of the next 2 years, Dahmer would go on to kill 14-year-old male sex worker James Doxtator, who basically he drugged, strangled, and also dismembered. Then he killed Richard. Oh, sorry. Oh, why do I not have this? Okay, I kind of messed up. I don't know why I don't have Richard Guerrero. Guerrero. So he killed Richard Guerrero, a 22-year-old man enticed to spend the night with Dahmer for $50. He was also drugged, strangled, and then Dahmer performed fellatio on the body before disposing of it in the same way as the previous ones. This time he kept the skull, and this skull lasted for months before being destroyed. Finally, in September 1988, Dahmer had relocated from his grandmother's house to a separate apartment, and only 2 days after moving in, Jeffrey was arrested for drugging and fondling a 13-year-old boy. Fucking monster. Okay, so he pled guilty of second-degree sexual assault and enticing a minor, but the sentencing was delayed for 2 months. And get this, on March 25th, 1989, he committed another murder. So that was like, I think it was within... Okay, that was... Okay. So on March 25th, 1989, he committed another murder on Anthony Sears, a 24-year-old mixed-race man and aspiring model. The pattern was the same. Dahmer offered to take Sears's photos at his home, and then he just drugged him and proceeded to strangle him. This time he preserved the body differently because, as he claimed, he viewed Sears's body to be so attractive that he wanted to keep the parts better. He preserved his head and genitals in acetone and kept them in a wooden box in his work locker. And he would also bring that wooden box whenever he moved. So, yeah. Like, Jesus, why? And also, mind you, like, while looking for just a portrait of... I'm not sure, but I think this was the photo, but like, while looking for Anthony Sears's just portrait photo, I came across the photo of a head, like from the crime scene from Dahmer's apartment, a head, hands, 2 hands, and genitals. I'm not sure if it's Anthony or if it was Anthony or not, but it was definitely a black male, and I was not ready for that photo. And obviously I'm not gonna show it here because I didn't download it, I didn't save it, I don't want to see it. It scarred me for life. Okay. So finally on May 23rd, 1989, so that's 2 months after the murder of Anthony Sears, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in jail with a work release so he didn't lose his job. Whoever ruled in his fucking case at the time is a fucking idiot. I'm sorry for like swearing so much, but like, why? Not only do you sentence him to like on probation, but you also sentence him to just like 1 year in jail. Okay, most of the day he spent like with a work release. Like, how does that make sense? don't fucking know. And he was also finally registered as a sex offender, even though this was not his first, you know, enticing a minor case or exposing himself in public or exposing himself in front of a minor case. It was just not the first, and yet he just only now he was registered as a sex offender, even though it's been years from like other crimes. And between 1990 and 1991, Dahmer killed a lot of people, and I mean a lot, and it was days apart between some of them. But in 1990, Dahmer killed 4 more men. On May 20th, 1990, 32-year-old Raymond Lamon Smith, who was his first victim at Dahmer's North 25th Street apartment, which was in Milwaukee, where all the remains were later discovered, Jeffrey actually retained Ricky's skull. So Raymond was known as Ricky Beaks, and Jeffrey retained Ricky's skull and spray painted over it, so that in case the skulls and bones are discovered, he would just claim they are fake because they were spray painted over. What a fucking monster. Okay. And then on June 14th, he killed 27-year-old Edward Warren Smith, who was Dahmer's acquaintance and was last seen with him at a party. Dahmer later murdered him and acidified his skeleton, and the skull was destroyed when placed in the oven to get rid of the moisture. Jesus. Edward's remains were actually never found. They were never recovered because they were like destroyed. Then on September 2nd, he killed 22-year-old Ernest Marquez Miller, a dance student who met Dahmer in front of a bookstore. Jeffrey admired his physique especially, and after he murdered Ernest and dismembered his body in a bathtub, he stored Miller's entire skeleton in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, and he also stored Miller's heart, biceps, portions of his legs in the freezer for later consumption. Then, on September 24th, he murdered 22-year-old David Courtney Thomas. He met Dahmer near the Grand Avenue Mall, where Dahmer previously bought the suit. This is the same mall where Dahmer bought the suitcase which he used to store Stephen Tuomi's body in. So the hotel incident. He used the same pattern of, just telling David a story about how he's a photographer, and he would just take David to his apartment to take some photos in exchange for money. Then he laced David's drink with drugs and strangled him to death. That's when he also took Polaroid photos of the dismemberment process. Again, David's remains were never recovered. Then on February 18th, that's still 1990, the first murder... Oh no, that's 1991. So the first murder Dahmer committed in 1991. He killed Curtis Durrell Strother. Curtis was 17-year-old man. And again, Dahmer lured him to his apartment, drugged him, handcuffed, and strangled Curtis to death. After which he proceeded with the dismembering of his body, retaining the skull, hands, and genitals. Okay, so I'm not sure, but this might be the picture that I saw. So it might not be Anthony Sears. It might have been Curtis's head, hands, and genitals that I saw. And I'm sorry I saw it. The image is never gonna leave my head, my mind, and I don't know, Google should warn me if Google just scarred me for life. Not that this story didn't scar me for life, it's fucking terrible. And the series wasn't much better. Like I couldn't finish it in one go. Like I had to take breaks. I had to take like a week break to actually finish it. Even though it doesn't really show, it's not as drastic. Like it doesn't show like super drastic details or anything. Like it doesn't really show anything, but it's so fucking, it's just heartbreaking. Okay, so here is like after Curtis's murder, that's when Dahmer actually changed the murder method with his victims into what was later called the love zombies. Because Dahmer would drill holes into the victim's skull, through which then he injected hydrochloric acid straight into the brain. And that would render the person incapable of fighting back, basically, you know, just disoriented, not really understanding the surroundings, and, you know, numb to anything that happens around them, which was pretty much like a lobotomy. That's what he did on April 7th to his next victim, Errol Lindsay, who was 19 years old at the time. But Errol somehow awoke after the quote-unquote procedure, but then Dahmer just simply gave him a drink with more sedatives and strangled him to death. Lindsay's skull was also found in Dahmer's apartment. The next victim, and this story is fucking broke my heart, honestly, because it's just such a bad luck, you know, terrible luck. I don't know how this family survived this. Not that the previous victims, you know, stories weren't heartbreaking, but this one just took the word evil, being evil, to a whole new fucking level. Wait, IDK Bacon just donated and said, "Come on, Sona, update your safe search settings." I'm sorry, I didn't. Google is fucking stupid. Okay, so seriously, this case takes this whole situation, this whole like, you know, this whole story to a whole new level of evil. And there's gonna be another one that's also like terrible, but this one was just, I can't even find the words. So Jeffrey Dahmer met his next victim, Anthony Tony Hughes, at another party at a gay bar. Tony was this handsome young black man who aspired to be a model, but he also wanted to find love. You know, that special person he could make happy and be happy with. That's what his friends would later like testify. Like, Tony was really all about finding love and finding like real relationship. But there was one thing about Tony that he felt was an obstacle and drew people away from him, because Tony was deaf. You know, he would go to gay clubs and just hit the dance floor, swaying to the sound vibrations, and let them speak through him. He would then dance with other guys, and, you know, things were going great until they would grab a drink and Tony would have to pull out a little notebook to communicate. And, you know, the other person would just back away. You know, heartbreak after a heartbreak. They weren't really interested in dating someone who was deaf. But that didn't stop Tony. You know, he had big dreams and he didn't want to give up on love. And you know where I'm going with this. And I hate that I have to tell you this part, because it's fucking terrible and it's fucking heartbreaking and it's sad, and I couldn't go through this part of the story in one go. Like I had to take a step away and take a step back. So one night, Tony met an very attractive man at the bar. They danced, they grabbed drinks, and they clicked. The guy didn't actually mind that they had to communicate through Tony's notebook. He was charming, he was sweet, he seemed like he genuinely liked Tony, and the fact that, you know, Hughes was deaf was never an issue. And this man introduced himself as Jeff Dahmer. And it seemed like Tony wasn't just another target to Dahmer, like even on his side. It really seemed that Jeff liked this guy genuinely. Tony was later reported missing to the Madison, Wisconsin Police Department on May 31st, 1991, and he was last seen on May 24th by a friend at the 219 Club, which he left with Jeff. And here, reports on how Dahmer actually killed Tony vary. Some say that he strangled him. Others say that he followed his new ritual and first drilled a hole in Tony's head to pour acid into, and it was actually enough to kill Tony, so he didn't have to strangle him. It was just the acid. Also, mind you, let me take a step back, because here the reports also vary. Like, Tony's friends actually claimed that, you know, Tony knew Dahmer for at least a few days, like at least some time before his disappearance, and that they would go out together. So it was as if he was dating someone. But then Dahmer himself testified that he killed Tony that same night when he met him, so on May 24th. And I am not sure which one is true. Obviously, I would be more, you know, willing to believe the friends, because they knew Tony, so they obviously saw him, you know, around. Like, they said that Dahmer would come to Tony's workplace and ask for him, but I'm not sure. You know, like, I couldn't find like 100% confirmed report. It's just very okay. So after killing Tony, he actually left his body on his bedroom floor, just like that, for 3 days before dismembering it and keeping the skull per his regular process. And then some reports say it overlapped with his next murder victim, which happened on May 27th, and that Tony's body was there at the same time that day, when Dahmer brought 14-year-old Conorak Synthesophone to his apartment. And this is, again, we're kind of circling back to the Synthesophone family, which is another fucking sad story. And Jesus. Okay, so Conorak was also lured to Dahmer's home, then drugged, and then his skull was drilled and injected with acid to suppress his will and strength to run and fight. Dahmer actually left Conorak unattended to go to the nearby store for some more beers, and didn't expect that the boy would try to escape. But Conorak did. Conorak actually, like, you know, got out of the apartment and actually got out of the building. He was, when Dahmer returned, Conorak was actually sitting right outside of the building, naked and disoriented, in the company of 3 young women from Dahmer's building. They actually called the police about the boy, but when 2 officers, John Balzerzak, so this name is actually Polish, so I know the Polish, the way to pronounce it. I don't know the English way to pronounce it, but John Balzerzak and Joseph Joseph Gabrish. I don't fucking care how to pronounce these officers' names, honestly, because they are pieces of shit. So 2 officers first came to the crime scene, the scene, and they actually believed Dahmer when he said that the boy was 19, even though the boy was clearly 14. Like, you can see from the picture that he doesn't look 19. But Dahmer actually convinced the officers that the boy was 19 and he was his lover. And then another officer, Richard Parbkan, I think, I don't care how to pronounce his name, but another third officer came to the scene, and the three of them actually helped bring Konorak back into Dahmer's apartment, even though he was outside, even though the neighbors, the three women, were outside. The police did not believe the women who reported it, and, you know, there's a lot of talks about bias and racism because those women were, you know, women of color. And, you know, the fact that it was just like, oh, the fact that these women and Konorak himself weren't white, and then Dahmer's word, you know, Dahmer was white and his word was taken as more reliable, believable over theirs, which is fucking insane. And the bias because this was a relatively poor neighborhood, and they just didn't care. So they actually took Konorak back to his apartment, and this is like where there's also this one report about how they walked into the apartment, and, you know, they were also biased, like they were homophobic, and, well, I mean, they were biased against homosexual men, and then, you know, they were kind of reluctant, the officers were reluctant to even, like, look around the apartment, even though, like, as I said, reports kind of vary about it, but one report says that Anthony, like Tony Hughes's body, was still fucking there in the bedroom on that day. So all it took for the officers was to walk into the apartment, walk into the bedroom, and they would fucking see the body. They would see blood stains. They would see the pictures. And they didn't search the apartment. They just brought Konorak back to the apartment, and then they left. Oh yeah, and Kanta says the police were laughing the whole time. They found it hilarious, which is just, you know, piece of shit behavior. Fuck those guys. Not only that, there's another part of the story, like much later, obviously, when everything came out. You know, people were demanding that those two officers who failed this boy, people demanded that they are removed from the police force. And apparently, from what I can gather, those two officers were initially suspended, not even like kicked out, even though they fucked up royally. But they were suspended from duty for like a short time, apparently, and then they were brought back. Not only that, later they were fucking promoted, and much later, like a few years later, one of them became the chief of police. Like, this is, I'm not sure, this is like kind of, reports vary, but apparently that's what happened. Like, one of them just became a chief of police, or someone like higher rank. It's fucking crazy. I don't know. I can't even, I probably like, I'm cursing all the time, but it's just terrible. Okay. So after the police officers left, Dahmer again injected Konorak with more acid into his brain, and this time it proved fatal, so Konorak died. His head was retained in the freezer and body was dismembered. And then between June 30th and July 19th, Dahmer would kill 4 more people: 20-year-old Matt Cleveland Turner, 23-year-old Jeremiah Benjamin Weinberger, 24-year-old Oliver Joseph Lacey, and 25-year-old Joseph Arthur Bradhoft. Their bodies were dismembered, and often Dahmer would put torsos in the 57-gallon drum that he kept in his bedroom with, obviously acid inside. He would also keep some of the bodies in a bathtub filled with ice for weeks before dismembering them, and apparently he was bathing. He was taking cold showers with the torsos in the bathtub, or with the bodies in the bathtub. And then we circle back to Tracy Edwards, the survivor who managed to escape and finally led the police to Dahmer and his murder den and made them search the apartment thoroughly this time, only to discover all of the remains. And it's fucking terrible, and I fucking hate it, and just, you know, holy Jesus. So in the end, Dahmer was convicted of 16 out of 17 murders. Stephen Tuomi wasn't pursued. Like, apparently that case wasn't pursued as it was too different and there wasn't enough evidence to convict Dahmer of the crime. I guess mainly because Dahmer was insistent that he didn't remember what happened that night. They were both pissed drunk. Apparently that night Dahmer also, like, spiked Steven's drink, but accidentally, like, this is also not confirmed, but, like, accidentally he drank it himself, and he was, like, drugged and drunk, and both of them were drugged and drunk. So Dahmer had no recollection of the murder, and he said that he hadn't intended to kill him, and, you know, it was thrown out in favor of stronger indictments. So, you know, obviously 16 murders were definitely Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was given several life sentences for practically every murder and would spend his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution. It is there that he was later brutally murdered alongside another inmate by a third inmate, Christopher Scarver. Scarver was actually serving a life sentence for murder, and the three were left unsupervised for roughly 20 minutes one day, and that was in 1994. There are definitely suspicions that the prison had set it up for Dahmer to be murdered, to be killed. What can be said is that Jeffrey was reported to not yell or fight back at the time. He didn't make any noise. And when Dahmer was convicted, his closing statement was this, quote, "I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor. And I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration." End quote. So there's, like, a couple of other things that are interesting about this case that, you know, some of them are confirmed, some of them are not confirmed, obviously. One of them is that it's believed and confirmed by, you know, even Jeffrey's words, that Jeffrey didn't like killing. I'm not trying to obviously, like, justify him or anything or gain him pity points. Absolutely not. He was a monster. But, you know, allegedly he didn't like killing. He was a product killer. He just wanted the body. Like, he wasn't thinking about, like, oh, you know, killing the person. He just wanted to make those submissive. He didn't want to kill them. He wanted to make them submissive and make them basically into a zombies, into something that he could completely dominance over and like dominate over and control. And another thing of note from the detective that led the case, Dahmer actually trained himself to listen to the victim's heartbeat, to the point where he knew when the person was about to wake up or sober up from either alcohol or drugs, and that's when he would kill them. I guess, another thing is that he would preserve the body parts, because what he claimed it would do would prevent him from killing sooner. Like, the longer the body parts were kept fresh and he could use them, quote unquote, he would just go on longer without killing another person. I don't know about that, because he killed a couple of them. Like, I mean, I guess, yeah, I guess that makes sense, but like, still. There's another thing, like, there's a couple of other things. Dahmer was actually, like, in prison. He actually got, like, was interested again, like, got interested again in religion and God, and he wanted to be baptized. And apparently he got baptized on the same day as John Wayne Gacy, so another serial killer, the killer clown. He was executed. So, like, people just make this crazy connection, and then Dahmer was killed. So people made this crazy, like, connection about, like, Dahmer and Gacy, that, oh, they're, you know, baptism is technically, oh, coming back to life. And then Gacy was killed on the same day. He was, like, you know, executed on the same day. And there's some crazy, you know, coincidence. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's I think that's all I had to say in this case. Honestly, it's just fucking terrible. The police force, the, you know, the law enforcement, the justice system, it definitely failed. Like, it failed the people so much. It failed a lot of people, a lot of families. And yeah, I mentioned that Dahmer's father also wrote a book. He was going to, I think Jesus, I forgot what's the title of the book. Honestly, I don't care, but yeah, he wrote a book about it. There was going to be a movie. I don't know if there was a movie out of this book, but obviously the families of the victims were not happy, were very unhappy about it at the time. They sued Dahmer's father for profits from the book. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is this fucked up thing when Dahmer was in prison. And that's like another fucked up level. So when Dahmer was in prison, he was still alive. He was apparently getting a lot of fan mail, like a shit ton of fan mail, and a lot of people were sending him money. And by the time he was, you know, when he died, when he was murdered, he apparently got thousands of dollars. Like, people would send him like $5, $20, and they would ask him for an autograph, or you know, or a drawing or anything, or just to write them back or something. And he apparently got to the point where he had thousands of dollars stashed in his cell, which terrible, obviously. People were also, you know, some stupid kids were also going to the Oxford apartment, so the apartment building where the killings happened, and they were like taking photos in front of the apartment and like taking stupid pictures, like really still just treating it as a joke. And obviously people from the building were super unhappy with it. They were enraged. They appealed to the authorities, but nothing was done about it for the longest time. And then eventually the building was demolished, and the city promised people, like those people, you know, the victims' families, people who lived in the building, they promised them, okay, we're gonna demolish this, take this building down, and we're gonna build a park, possibly with a memorial for the victims in that place, in the place of the building. But that park never happened, so that plot of land was like empty. I'm not sure if there's anything there now, but I guess not. It's just empty plot of land, or maybe parking or something. But that was fucking awful too. What else? Oh yeah, I don't know how true that is. Like, in the series, I guess from what I can gather, in the series there's a neighbor who lived right next to Dahmer's apartment, and she could, you know, she could smell all the smells, like all that foul smell. She could hear sounds of the murders. But apparently that person was kind of, that character was kind of merged from several, like, true, like real life neighbors who were concerned, who could hear sounds, who could smell the smells, and who could tell that there was something wrong. And apparently you know, the neighbors kept calling. They made a shit within that year, like 1990 and 1991, that the span of a year, apparently the neighbors from that building, they were calling the police all the fucking time and reporting that there's something wrong with this person. There's something wrong with happening in Dahmer's apartment. But the police would never send, you know, they were never sending patrols. Like the patrols would never get there. The calls were ignored eventually. Obviously they were just ignoring that part of the neighborhood and ignoring those calls. And it's just infuriating, because had they checked, had they responded, you know, some of those people might have lived, and obviously they didn't. So huge failure on that part. But yeah, that's it. That's the end of this case. You guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please do check out the links to, you know, the Roses fundraiser for the Four Paws Service Dogs organization. And what else? Oh yeah, tomorrow I will have another true crime stream on my Patreon, which is gonna be the Girl Scout murders in Oklahoma. So that's the case for tomorrow. That's gonna be at 7 p.m. Pacific time, so the same time as today, but on Patreon. That's gonna be a Patreon-only stream. And from now on, I will have true crime streams every week. One here and one on Patreon, so you can look forward to that. I don't know how many streams I can do a week, because I'm preparing something for Halloween, some announcement. But that requires a lot of work, so I have to I have to focus on off stream, obviously focus on the cases, focus on making the slides and preparing for each case every week. So, you know, forgive me if I can't stream that often. But yeah, again, Kanta, big thanks to you for gathering, for compiling all that information. Thank you so much. That was a huge help. I'm sorry you had to go through this with me, and I'm so sorry you had to like go through this terrible case with me, and you know, like you had to look at the photos and you had to read all that stuff and write all that stuff. Thank you so much for that. That was a lot. Okay, and before I finish the stream, let me just move myself, and then I just wanted to thank my Patreons. Oh shit. But thank you to all of my Patreons for supporting my channel. You guys have you can see the whole list here on the screen, and yeah, you guys, you make it possible, you know. You make this this channel possible, those streams possible. You make me, you know, like, you let me continue with my work, and thank you. Okay, so that's it for today. Stay safe out there. Always lock your doors and windows. I don't know. Bury your axes and hold the law enforcement accountable for their fuck-ups, so that these cases don't happen. Also, to everyone in the state of California, to the, you know, or the US, just the US, please be on the lookout, because there's an active serial killer in California, in Stockton area. So please be careful, be very vigilant about your safety. This person has not been caught as of today, as of now. The police is still looking for them. So please be especially careful if you are in that area, if you live nearby, if you live in California, or if you're in the United States. Just, you know, just please be careful. Always be careful. Always be safe. Okay, that's it. So until the next time. Bye.